Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We're listening to My Lover, My Killer, Deadly Consequences of Obsession.
Asher Maslin and Holly Gazzo, from first date to going steady in just weeks.
I think it developed very, very quickly, something that kind of caught up with her rather than something that she expected straight away.
He was an attractive guy. He did seem as though he did have a good personality. So I can see the attraction there.
Not everyone would agree. He was not of good character at the school. As friends and family are powerless to stop their relationship, they're also blind to a dangerous secret.
Holly would not have known that Maslin had a very significant record of violence going back years.
I don't think she knew the great danger that she was in.
Emergency service.
We had a call. A female had been assaulted. An ambulance were on the scene.
The attacker was well known to both police and the victim, with a long history of violent and predatory behaviour.
With domestic abuse incidents, on average it's 30 incidents before people report. With stalking, it's around 50. People have this image of stalkers, strangers that follow you. I think if you look at them, you'll understand the risks.
Holly Gazzard, a millennial who grows up in a classic Middle England town. She and her sister, part of a loving family. Life in our household was very good. The two girls, as they grew up, were very different. Chloe was quite serious. Holly was very sporty. So they were very much like chalk and cheese, the two girls. But it was a very fun household. It was a loving household, and it's an enjoyable one. I really did enjoy the girls growing up.
Holly wanted to be an aspiring young lady who had the world at her feet. She didn't really want any responsibilities as such, so she wanted to be able to go out and do things by herself, experience the world, meet new people, travel, and really just experience her life how she wanted to, because travelling was her key.
When she turned into a teenager, she started to get involved in fashion. Hair, makeup. And I think the hair was the way that she wanted to go because she was a ginger, proud ginger, she said. She could change the way she looks just by altering her hair with that style, whether it was colour. So I think that gave her the bug. She did her work experience at a salon. And from then on, hairdressing was something that she really wanted to do. Her plan in 2013 is to get a job on a cruise ship as a hairstylist. It's her perfect job.
She found a passion. She loved to talk to people, so she had a real way about engaging with somebody and making them feel comfortable. She'd always wanted to do that, and she wanted to kind of combine hairdressing with her travelling.
We sat down one day and said, how do you want to travel? And we talked about it, and she came up with the idea of, about the cruise ship, because it can combine her hairdressing, which she just qualified as, and travelling.
So cruise ships were something that she really wanted to do, and we were, completely behind her on that.
She contacted a company called Steiner. She had the interview, and she got the job. Before leaving Gloucester, a chance to earn extra money to help her when she gets to London. She got a job in a local nightclub called Zest.
She was working there part-time alongside her hairdressing. She enjoyed the music there, and I think she just enjoyed the buzz. Holly told us not long after that she'd met somebody. She didn't necessarily say who it was, but she said she'd met somebody, she quite liked him.
His name, Asher Maslin. Holly is 19, Asher Maslin is 21. When she met him in the nightclub, a few days later, she said, Dad, can I bring someone home to the house? I said, of course you can, Holly, it's your house, you do what you like. When she brought him in, my wife said, oh no, not him. She knew of him from the school that my wife worked at. She remembered that he was not of good character at the school. Holly is attracted to a young man with something of a past. As a schoolboy, he was no stranger to trouble.
When she brought Maslin home the first time, they actually knew him. And they knew that he was trouble. But they were the kind of family where this is Holly's boyfriend, we will be welcoming. This is Holly's choice, we will support her. A very loving family.
What people are like at school is different, when they're growing up. I suppose most people have a little bit of a bad character when they're at school at some stage. So no, it didn't bother us. I always give people a second chance. So I just said, okay, well, let's see how things happening.
I think she thought he was okay. He was quite nice. She'd go out with him a few times. She was moving to London anyway. This wasn't going to ever be a long-term thing for her. I think she fell for him.
He was an attractive guy. He did seem as though he did have a good personality, so I can see the attraction there.
He probably was charming. I think he probably said what she wanted to hear. He was very nice to her, always wanting to be with her, couldn't do enough for her. And I think for Holly, that probably was something that she found quite attractive to start off with, definitely.
He was that charming character that Holly would go for, because she had a similar type of personality in terms of outgoing, social.
It developed very, very quickly, something that kind of caught up with her rather than something that she expected straight away.
There is an ugly scene on one family gathering.
When we did see him on the few times that we did as, a family occasion, or sometimes I'd see him with Holly, it came across as this just character that was wanted to be larger than life. Everyone bowed down to him. He liked to think that he could say something and someone would jump. We were at a restaurant once and he was beckoning over waiters and waitresses like this, and it was so embarrassing, and my husband had to take him outside and have a word with him. It was something that was meant to be a nice meal and he'd ruined it. It was the whole snapping of the fingers and I'm Mr. Important and look at me.
There is some consolation. Holly is about to leave Gloucester. Theirs is bound to be a short-lived relationship.
Holly was not that invested in the relationship that she had with Asher Maslin. She really was quite ambivalent.
She didn't really want to be with anybody. She'd split from a previous boyfriend and he was so lovely because she wanted to go on this cruise ship and they didn't want it to get in the way.
Within 2 weeks, she was off to London to train to go on the cruise ship. But what happened then was that Asher Maslin had followed her to London. He didn't have a job, he didn't have anywhere to stay, and he tried to build that relationship while she was in London training to go on the cruise ship. She was quite surprised because obviously she hadn't known him for long. And it was her dream that she wanted to go on the cruise ship, and she didn't really understand why he followed her there. Obviously, he had different motives to what Holly did. His passion ran deep, his generosity soon clear.
She hadn't been with him long. It escalated quite quickly, the relationship. It was getting intense quite quickly, buying each other things. He provided her with a car, and she just turned up in it one day and didn't really know what to make of it, but it suited her. It definitely suited her. But I think it was on the provisory that she had to take him where he wanted and pick him up when he wanted, because he bought her the car. She didn't buy it. He bought it.
He was looking for someone to own, somebody to be in a long-term possession type situation with, completely different to her.
Holly is still intent on finishing her training and joining a cruise ship.
She was doing her training and staying with some of the girls in all their dorms. I'm really having fun, enjoying her training, and enjoying kind of the nightlife out there. So she wasn't on her own, I suppose, so she didn't feel lonely.
A brief romance with a man who was clearly in love with Holly is not going to stop her setting sail. But does she know everything about him?
Holly would not have known that Maslin had a very significant record of violence going back years. He had a history of violence towards girlfriends and stalking.
Between 2008 and 2012, he has been arrested over 20 times for, amongst other things, abuse against a person-related offences. One ex-partner reports to a hospital with a broken arm. Holly Gazzard and her family are unaware of who they're dealing with. She stays in the relationship, but believes it won't be for long.
She was training for about 5 weeks, and she telephoned us, and we were so excited for her, as she was, and we had to take her to Heathrow to catch a flight. So we went to London. Whilst we were packing the car, Maslin suddenly turned up. We didn't even know that he was staying in London, and she said something like, "Oh, don't worry, Daddy's just come to see me off, that's all." So again, we didn't think any more of it. You know, we were driving her to Heathrow. She was on a flight, and then she had a contract for 9 months. She telephoned us a few times to say she'd arrived at Miami and she was on her ship. So that was great. You know, we thought, excellent. She's done what she wanted to do.
The much anticipated adventure on the cruise ship is unexpectedly cut short.
A week after Holly had been on the cruise ship, you know, we got a telephone call. And Holly just said, "Dad, can you arrange flights to get me back to Gloucester because I want to come home?" We couldn't understand why she suddenly wanted to come back. We thought that was really strange because she was a strong individual and she'd been planning it for months.
He wore her down. We can only imagine the kinds of things that he was saying to her to make her feel guilty. She felt so bad, in fact, that she came back. She came back off the cruise ship and she went back to her family in Gloucestershire.
We didn't question her, we didn't quiz her because, you know, she was 3,000 miles away. We didn't want to upset her. You know, she's only 19 at that stage. We arranged the flights, got her back, and my wife went to pick her up at the airport, and we got her back to Gloucester.
And he followed her there. He was obsessed.
She said to us that, "I really love being in London. I like that fast pace that they have for fashion and that passion that she has for fashion, you know, hairdressing and things." And she said, "I really want to go back to London, Dad, to be in that environment." So we said, "Fine. Why don't you go back?" She was a strong person. There was no reason why Holly wouldn't be able to cope on her own. The first job she inquired about, we took her up for an interview. She got the job, and that was as a stylist in Edgware. So we thought, great, she's now back doing what she wants to do in a happy place.
A trip to see her brings confusion.
The first we knew that Holly was seeing Maslin was when we went up to London to take Holly out for lunch. When we got there, she told us that Maslin had followed her back to London, which again we thought was quite strange because we didn't know they were in that relationship. She was quite a different person, subdued. She didn't look happy. She wasn't that fun-loving, bubbly character that she usually was. Her phone was constantly ringing. And one call we heard him say, "Don't let them take you home." We never thought anything of it. Obviously, he was frightened that she would go back to Gloucester with us, and he would then lose that position of isolation. He was frightened that we would take her away from him at that stage.
He would have wanted rid of Holly's family, get them away. They're the voice of reason. They're going to say things about me. They're going to tell Holly that I'm a bad person. He's going to want shot of them.
Holly was living in Watford. They shared a bedsit. They had all their bits and bobs in there, and she used to go out to work. I'm not sure what he did. I think it was quite a dingy little flat, and it wasn't really, I think, what she wanted. He did alienate her and he drove a wedge. I remember going to visit her once in London. And her phone was just ringing and ringing and ringing, and she was getting a coffee with my dad, and I just looked at her phone and there was a text message and it said, "Don't let them take you away from me. They'll make me out to be in a bad light," around those sort of words, basically making sure that she'd stay there.
Holly, unusually for her, becomes less open to her family.
It doesn't surprise me at all that he turned his attention to them and was nasty and undermining about them, trying to get Holly to be loyal only to him.
Maslin tells Holly it's her family that has caused any issues between them.
I used to think that he maybe wanted a lot from her, but that also seems quite nice at the time, and what they spent doing, they spent a lot of time together, which again seems lovely.
But not always.
When they were together, it was quite loud. They used to drink together sometimes, and he would get quite rowdy, and she'd then get upset. So you could always see that there was some tension there. You never knew what was kind of going to happen next. It was obviously a very toxic relationship. I think Holly was very much, I told you he was fine, so he will be fine. I don't ever think she wanted to maybe notice that there was something that she didn't see straight away, because she was a very strong character. She likes to do stuff by herself, independent. If you tried to tell her, she wouldn't necessarily accept it straight away.
In May 2013, we invited Holly back for my wife's birthday. We were having a birthday party at the local restaurant, so we also invited him because, he was with Holly. We were all sat at the restaurant waiting, and an hour went by, and he then suddenly appeared. And he'd been drinking, he was drunk, really. And when he got into the restaurant, we saw a very different side to Maslin. He was aggressive. He was being rude to the staff. He was rude to the other people in the restaurant, short with Holly, and the way he treated her I didn't like. These types of people, they have that two personas. They have the private one and the public one. And I think what we saw that night was the private persona. Perhaps that's how he acted with Holly when she was on her own. He was manipulative, just a horrible person to be around. And at that stage, it was obviously the drink that had brought that out of him, because it let his guard down. The following day, they were going back to London, and we were quite worried. She was going back with him when we saw what he was like. But obviously, it was Holly's decision to go back, so we couldn't really do anything. she seemed to be handling it. Whether that is because Holly was putting on a good act, or whether it was because she could handle the situation that she was in. But I don't think she knew the grave danger that she was in.
The next thing is violence.
I think he kicked her up the bum a few times and made comments about her and not made her feel very nice.
How can Holly break free of him? There've been ups and downs in the relationship between Asher Maslin and his girlfriend Holly Gazon. But the bad times were beginning to outweigh the good times.
Well, Holly went to the Notting Hill Carnival at the end of August with him and quite a few members of his family, extended family, who were in London.
At the event, something happened which causes Holly to call home.
She said, he's floored me, I want to come home. We'd made arrangements for the next day for my dad to go down and get her.
When I went to London, I wasn't aware of what happened. All I knew is that she wanted to come back to Gloucester. I just thought she'd had enough of London, she was missing Gloucester, that was her home, and she wanted to come back.
She does not immediately tell her parents.
It was a couple of days after she was back that Chloe told me there was an altercation at Notting Hill, and she got floored. I didn't get too involved in it, trying to press Holly on it. There was no real reason for it. She was now back under the family roof. We understood he was still in London. She just got on with things, really.
Holly decides not to make a formal complaint to the police.
It's not unusual at all for a victim of intimate partner violence not to press charges. And that's not always because they love this person. They're terrified of them. Pressing charges is the ultimate in disloyalty, and there will be consequences for that. The only person who can absolutely guarantee Holly's safety in this situation is Asher Maslin. If he decides not to hurt anyone. So it's entirely logical you try and keep him on side until you can see a safe space for getting out.
Back on the safe ground of her home city, her family relaxes. Holly shields them from what Maslin is doing. She appears to have restarted her life.
We found out that Maslin came back to Gloucester the day that we went to collect Holly. He asked his family to go and pick him up and bring him back to Gloucester. So she didn't even get a break from him. He got his claws into her and he started to build that relationship again. So she wasn't on her own for very long. He manipulated his way back into her life. You don't want to push the individual away. We didn't want to push Holly away. We didn't want to tell her how to live her life. We didn't want to tell her who she could see because, she was her own person. She was strong. She could handle the situation. We thought so. She thought so.
The relationship is back on. At first, it seems to be working.
She got back to her old self and she seemed to be very happy. She didn't see him that often. We saw him occasionally. He was the gift of the gab type person. He had that swagger. He knew how to handle people in that public environment. He loved himself, obviously. He knew how to get round people.
But then the not-so-charming Asher Maslin reappears.
We were in the house watching TV. We were just about to go to bed, and there was a banging on the front door, and we opened it, and it was him. Maslin was there. And he said, I want to see Holly. I said, oh, hang on a minute. He said, no, I want to see her. And then Holly came down the stairs and said, Dad, you go in, I'll speak to him, I'll deal with him. I had to say to Holly in the morning, Holly, I wasn't really enamoured by what happened last night, and I don't really want him round here again if he's going to behave like that. She said, okay, Dad, I'll talk to him, I'll tell him not to come round here again. And we never saw him again. We knew that he continued to have that relationship with Holly because she would say certain things to us, and people outside would see them together.
she had been really kind of effervescent as a person and very confident. She was only a tiny little thing as well, and very popular girl, but the change in her was absolutely noticeable. And when that change starts happening, that means that fear has crept into Holly's life. And this was a really, really dangerous man.
Maslin is watching her every move, and worse.
There was an escalation in his behaviour towards her.
He had been caught on CCTV strangling her, and he had hit her. We know all of this.
Holly didn't want to make a complaint at that point. Ashley wasn't charged with anything.
She was quite scared, and the police said, well, sleep on it, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll take a statement from you. And she was quite reluctant to do that and sign a statement because I think she was fearful of what he could do.
Holly works hard to put up barriers to protect herself.
I worked at the Teddy, a little pub where we live in Gloucester. Holly joined the team there, and I was there as a supervisor, so I was there to train her up and obviously worked alongside her.
One of the reasons why she got that job was because Maslin then couldn't see her in the evenings. He wanted to be with her a lot, and I think it was cramping her style.
He tried to come in a few times and we ended up barring him. He'd been quite argumentative with somebody that was talking to Holly and ordering drinks, and it was just making her miserable and just creating an atmosphere whilst he was there.
She wanted to see her friends and other people, but he wouldn't allow that. So by working at the pub in the evenings, it was a sort of a sanctuary. It was a bit where she could get away. So actually, she was quite safe in there, and she could deal with the customers. She had a way about her, Holly. Everyone loved her in terms of the punters in the pub.
We didn't think that she was in any real danger. We didn't think that he would do anything beyond just say words.
Soon after, plagued by him, Holly tells friends that it really is time to finish the relationship. But it's not that easy.
He became a stalker, and he was a rejected stalker, which is one of the ones that are quite concerning.
In the January-February 2014, Holly sort of said to me quite a few times, Dad, I want to get rid of this guy. I don't want to be with him anymore. He's a bit of pain. I just want to be myself. I want to be Holly. I want to get back to doing the things I wanted to do with my friends. I said, well, just tell him. She said, okay, I'll tell him. She came back to me another time and said, Daddy, he's not getting the message. Do you want me to tell him? She said, no, Dad, I'm quite happy to deal with it. I've just got to get that message through to him. And I had no cause for concern with Holly because she was that strong character. She could handle herself quite easily. Even though she was only small, she packed a punch.
On the day that she sat down with him face to face and had the confidence and the courage to say to him, this is over, there's no going back, I really, really mean it, and she got up and she left, he would have been absolutely in no doubt at that point that no amount of control was ever going to get her back.
He threw a glass of water in her face. She ran to a car. He jumped in, put a hand on the handbrake, stopped her going, stole the debit card in footwell and the handbag, and then waltzed across to the local cash point and withdrew a lot of her money.
And that would be the point at which he would have decided to kill her.
Having finished with Escher Maslin in a public place, Holly Gazzard is confronted with yet more violence from him.
She tried to finish with him on Valentine's Day in a public place where she felt kind of safe and controlled and that she knew her surroundings. He obviously threw water in her face, stole her bank card, and really frightened her. She didn't tell anyone until the next day. She went to bed with that by herself.
We picked her up the Saturday evening, again as we normally did, and then she was quite a different person. And she started to tell us all about what was happening. And we didn't have a clue of what was happening in that relationship. Some of the things that she would tell us, things like he would kill himself if she broke up with him, so he's putting that real guilt trip on Holly and that blackmail. I said to Holly, right, Holly, from what I've heard, I think we ought to involve the police now because it doesn't seem that he's going to go away. So she called the police, and some of the things that she started to tell them I could not believe in terms of, how he threatened to throw acid in her face to spoil her looks and occur as a hairdresser. We were in tears, my wife and I, in terms of what we heard that evening.
Holly tells her parents that she feels relieved the police now know how bad it has become.
She was obviously frightened. She was very wary of what was around her. She still caught the bus to work. I think she still felt she was quite safe.
The whole staff were alert to the fact that she'd been having problems with Asher, and I'm pretty sure they knew what happened the previous week where she had been assaulted and they'd taken her bank card.
Definitely in more contact with her, just to reassure her, check in with her, make sure she was okay.
I texted her saying, everything okay? She said, yep, Dad, I've seen him, so yeah, I'm quite happy. As far as I was concerned, that was it. That was the end of it.
That day, Maslin is seen in town. He wants to sell something.
Maslin took a DVD player into the local cash store, and he sold it. I think it was for £5. Then he bought a kitchen knife.
We've got CCTV wandering around the town, but almost with a purpose, almost as though he's psyching himself up. That's what it looked like.
He was planning his move. He knew that the salon would be quite empty later on in the evening because it was open late, and the later it was, the less people that day would have been in there.
I was the late turn duty detective inspector when we had a call from the control room to let us know that an incident had occurred.
We understand Maslin walked in, called for Holly.
Back at Chloe's house, a disturbing text message arrives.
There was an arrangement with Holly. Her friend would contact the police as soon as he turned up, which is what she did. It was a concerning call, and as the information progressed, we realised just how serious that the incident was.
Holly came out to the front desk. She said to him, please go away, I don't want you here. And then he pulled out a knife, grabbed her left arm and stabbed her.
The attack is brutal.
The call to police then recorded that Holly was being assaulted. Pretty much from the offset, we were aware that it was unlikely that Holly was going to pull through, that it was likely that she was going to die. I had sent 2 officers to the home address of Holly because I felt really strongly that we need the family there. Family needed to be there at that point.
We were having tea around Holly's sister's house, so I was at their house and I had to go back to our house to pick up something which I'd forgotten. And as I came out of the front door, I saw a car park across the drive, and I thought that's a bit strange. And 2 people then started to walk towards me. And again, I thought, really strange. And they said, "Are you Nick Gazzard?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Do you have a daughter called Holly?" And as soon as they said that, my heart sunk and I thought, something's happened to Holly. And then they told me that Holly had been killed. It's very difficult to explain, you know. The bottom falls out of your world. It's turned upside down, back to front, inside out, and that's the only way I can explain it. And I'm thinking, God, how am I going to tell Holly's mum and sister that she's been killed?
A message sent to Chloe by Maslin suddenly makes sense.
He'd been sending messages, you know, as the last few weeks went by. So we just looked at it and thought, what are you on about? He threatened my dad in text messages. He'd tried to threaten me. He tried to threaten my husband.
He even sent Chloe's partner a text after he'd murdered Holly, and he said something like, "It did not have to end like this. You made me do it."
Once he'd done what he'd done to Holly, who was to say where he was going next and who he was going for?
The police then took us to Gloucester Royal, took us into a room whereby we waited for about half an hour, and then the consultant came in, and I could see him shaking. And he had to tell us that, you know, Holly had been stabbed multiple times. He said at least 14 times in the neck, the heart, and the chest. He said the only crumb of comfort I can give you is that after the first one or two blows, she probably wouldn't have been aware of it.
Holly's death is now a murder inquiry. Maslin is on the run.
We were unaware of where he'd gone, but there were concerns obviously around threats to Holly's father. So it wasn't just thinking about Holly's immediate victim, but other potential victims. And so we needed to make sure that they were safe.
We were under armed officers at the hospital because obviously he'd threatened us as a family. So we were then moved.
We had at that point ensured that Holly's family were taken somewhere safe and not returned to the family home, which was quite distressing for us. That was where Holly lived, so for us they'd only lost not only lost their daughter, but we were then telling them you can't go home.
Police received tip-offs from the people of Gloucester.
We knew that he lived within Gloucester. He was at times that we were told he had no fixed abode, but I think he almost kind of safe for served. We didn't know where Asher was, and as far as we were aware at that point, he was still armed with a knife.
I think it was about 20 to 2 in the morning that they called us and said they caught him.
We got the phone call in the morning at 2 o'clock that he'd been taken down. I suppose he'd been captured.
And that's when we could sort of just breathe a little sigh of relief that he really wasn't coming after us. Because up until that point, we don't know whether he was coming after us as well.
He was arrested by armed officers in the early hours of the 19th, so probably about 8 or so hours later.
His eventual arrest is down to his own family.
His family took him to the police station because I think he went to lie low at one of his relatives' house, and they told the police that he was there because obviously they were shocked at what he'd done, completely shocked.
The evidence against him is overwhelming, but he does not admit guilt when first appearing in court.
He showed no emotion. There was no remorse shown by Maslin, and he would stare at members of the family.
He used to just sit there and he would grin and he would stare, and there was no remorse there whatsoever. I remember once just going in and he would just stare at my husband and making my husband feel quite infuriated that he can actually still do this after he's taken Holly's life.
It wasn't until the third appearance that Maslin eventually admitted his guilt. The only good thing about him pleading guilty was that would save us going through a trial. We only had then the sentencing to go to, which was in Gloucester.
I think Gloucester took Holly to its heart, really, and it was very much, you know, we wanted to have justice for Holly, but the community wanted justice for Holly. The resident judge at Gloucester requested that the sentencing was heard in Gloucester, and it was really impactful when the family read out their victim and personal statements around the impact of Holly's death.
I wasn't going to read it, and it wasn't until my nan said to me, "Oh, come on, Chloe, you can do this." And I thought, do you know what? I am, and I'm going to do it for Holly, and I'm going to do it so he can hear it coming from me. He wouldn't look up. He wouldn't look at me, and I wanted him to realise what this has done to me and what this has done to my family and the people it's affected. Because not only has he taken Holly's life, the amount that he's affected elsewhere is huge.
He was given a life sentence with a minimum of 24 years, which actually is a reasonable sentence on a guilty plea. But do I think it's enough? No, I don't think anyone would ever think it was enough a sentence for what he did that day.
And really, 24 years is probably about the maximum that he would have got. Whatever he would have got, it was never going to be enough for us.
I wish we were in a different place sometimes where we could have much longer sentences, because I think that's what it deserves.
The family will face one more ordeal at the hands of Christian Maslin.
He appealed his sentence. We then had to go to the Court of Appeal in London to hear another hearing with the 3 High Court judges. Fortunately, after about half an hour or so, they threw his appeal out.
Since her death, the launch of the Holly Gazard Trust.
I thought, well, how can I use what happened to Holly to stop happening to other people? And I thought, well, if I can set up a charity, we can do some work, and even if we can save one person, then it would be well worth it. Stalking, knife crime, coercive control, domestic abuse. So we raise those issues and we try and get them across all of our social media platforms, raise it with the public. Then hopefully we'll stop other people going down the route that Holly went down and being caught in these relationships.
Holly was just 20 when she was killed.
It's a daily thing that you have to live with and you have to battle with, especially in the circumstances that Holly died. It's just painful memories that come up, and until they're dealt with, it's something that can just be traumatic day after day.
We think about Holly every day. We always talk about Holly. We're very open about Holly, what happened to her and her life. We celebrate the 20 years that she was here with us. But it's hard. Every day's hard for us because every day you talk about it, it brings it back. But I think we need to do that to be able to help other people. So every day is hard, but it's hard for a reason.